Welcome to episode number 4 of the N1 Analytics Podcast. I am your host, Alex West, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Mate Christison. Mate is going to walk us through the conference finals. We're going to talk a little All-NBA team. We're going to talk a little bit of LA Clippers, and then Mate is going to give you one of the great hot takes of all time. So stay tuned and welcome to the podcast. So I want to bring in Mate now. Mate, how are you today, sir? Mate Christison.
I'm good.
Resident NBA expert. Good. Do you want to give him that hot take you had before the podcast that we were talking about? You want to lead with that?
All right. Well, all right. I hope all the listeners are sitting before I say this because it's a doozy. But I'm going to say LeBron James is good at basketball.
There it is. That's a wrap. All right. Next podcast, the hot take of the day. This is something I've really been working on. I need sponsors so that I can say that's the 1-800-Flowers.com hot take of the day, and then you can say LeBron James good at basketball. All right, so it has not been horribly entertaining conference finals either way. 2 games done in the Western Conference, 1 game done in the Eastern Conference. What are your just immediate takeaways from all that?
Well, it was half of an interesting game in the West until Kawhi went out with his injury. Maybe interesting is not the right word because it's kind of going into a blowout the other direction. But I'm with you. I'm not mustering a whole lot of enthusiasm for these conference finals, and that is kind of a shame.
Yeah, I think at this point I'm just resigned to it. I was hoping that it was going to be good, but with Kawhi's injury, I'd never thought particularly that the Celtics were going to be too competitive. I still hope they get a game or maybe 2 games, but they're not a real threat to win this series, I don't think. And the Spurs without Kawhi, they're not a threat to make the playoffs, I don't think. I don't think they're a very good team without him, and so it's just been less than entertaining. I guess my only question about the Western Conference Finals is, do you think they would have won Game 1 barring injury?
I mean, yeah, I think the scoreboard speaks to that fact. Yeah. I mean, they were up 25 points?
Yeah.
I mean,
and just
without that injury, I think that's a very competitive series.
I do
that
too.
Would be a joy to watch.
I do too, and Kawhi was the best player on the floor in that first game until the moment he turned his ankle the first time, and then the second time was just Zaza sticking his foot in him, but turned his ankle on David Lee's foot, and then the eventual Zaza Pachulia killing the series. Before that, I felt like he was the best player on the floor, better than Durant, better than Steph Curry. He was just the guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess I've seen takes kind of going both ways on this. I mean, what do you think? It's a dirty play, sliding up under Kawhi to turn his ankle like that?
So I'm not unbiased on this. I hate Zaza Pachulia. He used to be a Hawk, and I hated him when he was a Hawk, and then he was a Buck, and I hated him when he was a Buck, and then I forgot he played when he played for the Mavericks. But he always has done things like this, like really weird plays where it's like, is it a dirty play? And then you get that preponderance of evidence at some point where it's like, well, if you've done it 6 times, if you've tried to wrench a guy's arm out, or if you've tripped guys, or if you've done all these things, when you get a certain number of incidents, it's like, well, yeah, they're all questionable, and yeah, I can't convict you on any of them, but when you have enough of them, it starts to look malicious. And so that's my take on Zaza. Is like, maybe he did it on purpose, but maybe he didn't. But we're so far into it now and he's done this so many times that it doesn't really matter.
Fair enough.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a hard one because, so many times with these dirty plays, whether it's, the nut shots from Serge Ibaka or something like that, I mean, very clearly a dirty play. This is a very sly dirty play, if indeed it is such a thing.
The best kind of dirty play.
It's
real sneaky.
I will say, it is a dirty play just because, the results were catastrophic for the Spurs, worse than a nut shot would be or anything like that. But so many, casual viewers will just see it and say, it looks like just another play to me. that maybe it won't get that sort of reputation.
I think either way, no matter which way you slice it, if you think it's a dirty play or you think it's not, I think it's a super unfortunate play because
Oh, absolutely.
it just robbed us of a great conference finals.
It did. It did.
Do you think there's any chance, I mean, even a game without Kawhi, do you think it's just predicated on whether Kawhi plays or not?
I do. I don't see the Spurs with much of anything without Kawhi. I guess LaMarcus Aldridge has been maybe a little bit of a disappointment on that front. I was hoping he would maybe carry them a little bit more with Kawhi out, but that seems not to be the case. So
yeah, well, a lot of Spurs fans have talked to me about what a huge disappointment he's been all year, and I think that is like really shown itself in the playoffs in the past couple of days. It just like he played well in Game 6 of the Houston series. He didn't play well in Game 5. He has like an on-off switch where it's every other game he plays well, and then just doesn't play well. I'm trying to find the box score to see what he had in that game. It wasn't good, whatever it was.
Yeah. It just seemed, when the Spurs acquired him, I just thought it seemed like such an un-Spurs-like move to really chase after, a high-level player like that. They've always seemed to be more, draft or, get him from some other country and build them into a good player,
Yeah.
But not really to chase after those sort of big market players.
Yeah.
So.
Aldridge, this was his stat line from Game 2: 8 points, 4 rebounds. All right. That's what.
Wow.
That's what you pay a max player for, is 8 points and 4 rebounds. Jeez.
That was more unfortunate than I thought it was going to be. Wow, that's really disappointing.
Bad. The other takeaway I have from the Spurs Warriors series is there any chance that Jonathan Simmons is not getting like a $40 million contract to play in Brooklyn next year?
With the new CBA, I honestly have no idea what any contract is worth anymore.
I think that, who I think is with you? Most GMs in the NBA. I don't think somebody looked themselves in the face and said, you know who's worth $16 million a year? Timofey Mozgov. So I don't think anybody knows what anything's worth anymore.
Fair enough.
What about Eastern Conference? Anything interesting? I mean, besides, I think the obvious takeaway, and starting with your hot take of LeBron James being a great basketball player, is just that he demolished the Celtics in Game 1. It wasn't close.
No, it wasn't. That game was well over by halftime, probably over by the end of the first quarter, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
It was most unfortunate for the Celtics. But, I'm kind of with you. I do want it to be somewhat of an entertaining series. I don't want it to be another sweep. I mean, you never want to see a sweep in the conference finals. I mean, it's bummer enough to see them in the first round, but certainly at this stage, you don't want, particularly if both conferences end up being a sweep, then that would be quite disappointing.
I was wrote my article today, and I didn't realize it until it was on paper and I was looking at it. The last time LeBron got knocked out was 2010 by an Eastern Conference team. 2010. That's amazing.
Yes, it truly is. Well, like I said, LeBron James is a good player.
He's good at basketball.
He's good at basketball.
He's so good at basketball that we have coined a new term to apply to LeBron series. We say that things are competitive sweeps now. That's a phrase that we coined just for LeBron. It was like,
I've not heard that phrase before, but I like it. I like it.
I heard it about particularly the Pacers series because all the games were close, but the series wasn't close at all. They're like, yeah, that's a competitive sweep. That's how good LeBron has been for the past 2 or 3 since he came back to Cleveland. And I think that that's something about LeBron, that the maturation of LeBron from the first time he was in Cleveland and then the Miami years back to this is he's matured so much from what he was the first time he's in Cleveland to now. It's kind of unbelievable to me because he was a very good player when he took the Cavs to the finals in 2007, but he wasn't what he is now. And now he is a one-man force. Playing with Bosh, playing with Wade, learning how to win in tough situations, and then learning how to apply himself both in a very Jordan-esque way of like learning when to pick his spots and then learning when to trust his teammates. That the years in Miami were the growth for him. That was his learning period of how to be the best player in basketball. I mean, he already was, but I think it was close. It was like 1 and 2. And I realize now that no one can see what I'm doing when except you. But that 1 and 2 were very close at that time. And then after about the first title team, I guess 2012, 2013 in Miami, the jump got much larger. That the difference between LeBron James and the second best player in basketball, probably Kevin Durant at that time, the gap widened so much. How do you feel about that? Do you think like the years in Miami were the growth, or do you think?
Oh, I do. I mean, you're expecting at some point LeBron to sort of lose a step. You're waiting to see him peak and then start to, and he still hasn't peaked yet. So that's one thing. It's insane how much he does get better every single year.
It's unbelievable. He adds a new facet, or like this year. I think the thing that's impressed me the most with LeBron this year is just how well he moves the ball around. So he finds shooters everywhere. He's always been a great passer, but this is kind of like a maestro. Like he knows where everybody is, and he uses everybody, and everybody gets to their spot. And I think that's what's impressed me the most in terms of his growth this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll say the other thing is that LeBron sort of has a gear that he keeps for the playoffs. He can just crank it up to 11 for the playoffs, and he certainly didn't have that. Like I would say in the Mavs playoffs from way back when his first year in Miami. He didn't have that gear back then, but he certainly has it now, and he can be a one-man force, and he can drag teams that really have no business being there to victory.
I think he almost had an overheated gear. Like he almost was the first couple of years in Miami, the last couple of years in Cleveland. He almost had a 12, and the 12 was just pushing too hard. He was pushing past 10 because he wanted to do everything, because he wanted to win so much, and he wanted to carry his team, and he wanted to be the best player, that I think he pushed too hard, and that kind of backfired on him. And that the learning how to pull it back and play within himself has just been a magnificent growth for him as a basketball player.
Yeah.
So this seems like a good segue into all NBA voting. Where some clown voted for LeBron on second team.
I noticed that as well. I would very much like to know who that was.
That's to me the most exciting part of the June 26th stupid award show with Drake is like, I want to know who voted for LeBron for second team, and I want to know who voted for Russ for second team, and I want to know who voted for Kawhi for third team, because those people lose their votes.
Yeah, I mean, there were some quite interesting what you mentioned there. I mean, with Russell Westbrook, I agree, he absolutely is a first team player. I can see that somewhat more than I can with LeBron, just because he still does have his faults. I mean, he carried his team completely as far as they could go without Durant this year, but it's a little bit more justifiable. Again, I don't think it's the correct vote, but it's a little bit more justifiable than not voting for LeBron.
But what guard do you vote for? I mean, obviously Harden, but who's the second guard that you vote for that go like, yeah, this guy had a better season? Is it Curry? I mean, is it?
It could be. I was very surprised to see that that Steph Curry did only get one vote for first team. I guess it was whoever voted for Russell Westbrook for second team. I mean, yeah, his stats weren't as good as they were last year, but when you're adding Durant onto your team, that's somewhat to be expected. He doesn't have to score as much with Kevin Durant on the floor. So I was a bit surprised that, not that he made second team, but that he only got one vote for first team. That took me a little bit back. That, for what it's worth, DeAndre Jordan got more first team votes than Steph Curry did. As I'm looking at it,
which I know that you're a Clippers fan, but like, come on, really, DeAndre?
No, I'm actually with you. I am a Clippers fan. DeAndre Jordan is not a first team player by any stretch. Third team, without Chris Paul, what is DeAndre Jordan? That's sort of my take on it. I like DeAndre. He's a fun player. He's an exciting player. He's very good at what he does, but he can't generate an offense on his own.
Yeah.
And without Chris Paul, just to throw it. I mean, I guess really you could say any point guard could do what Chris Paul does in that one respect. All you have to do is throw it near the rim, and DeAndre takes care of the rest. But if he's playing on a team with Russell Westbrook, I don't see DeAndre Jordan as an all-star. I don't see DeAndre Jordan as all-NBA third team. I don't see him anything as other than a good center.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like DeAndre. I really do, because I think that there's a definitely still a place for rebounder, shot blocker, guy who dunks. Like, I think that every team needs that guy, and I'm a Celtics fan. Like, we really need that guy because we don't have that guy at all. But having a guy who protects the rim, who dunks, but who can soak up 25% of the rebounds, defensive rebounds, and 10% of the offensive rebounds on any given night, having that guy is so valuable. But I think you're right. It's so hard for that guy to create on his own. And Rudy Gobert, who made the All-NBA second team, is kind of that same guy. He doesn't have any away from the rim capability, but I think you're totally right. I think like DeAndre Jordan rode to the NBA third team on the back of Chris Paul, and he owes him like 25% of his check. You think like?
Perhaps much more than that.
Probably so.
We'll see. I mean, I still sort of question whether DeAndre Jordan is a max player. Obviously Doc thinks he is.
Well, don't put too much stock in that.
I mean, he's a great fit where he is. But I mean, if the Clippers do lose Chris Paul in the offseason, then I trade DeAndre as fast as I can before his stock falls.
So you think if Chris Paul goes, it's a full-on rebuild? Like, I don't think he's gone, because I think he built that clause into the CBA so he can make $200 million. So I don't think he's – I mean, honestly, that's the God's honest truth. I really don't think that he's –
No one has ever said Chris Paul is not a crafty man.
Yeah, and good for him. I mean, listen, if you got control of the CBA and you can make $200 million, listen, that's what I do too. But I'm looking at their salaries right now. DeAndre's locked in through next season, and then he has a player option for the year after that. Blake and Chris both have player options this year that I almost guarantee you they're both going to exercise. But I really don't see a lot of change in this team. I think Chris Paul comes back because of the money. I think Blake Griffin comes back because of the money. And then I think some of the ancillary pieces probably move around. I mean, Redick's probably gone.
Well, yeah. I guess the question for Chris Paul is he happy with the money? Is he happy with the LA lifestyle? Or does he want a ring? Because I don't think that the Clippers, if he continues to play for the Clippers, I don't think he will get a ring.
Yeah, that's fair.
I hope that they can make, like, to me, their upper cap is probably making the finals, or even making the conference finals, which they still have not yet done. That would be about, if the Clippers can get to the conference finals, I'm a happy man. Currently I just don't think that they could beat Golden State. But what does Chris Paul think? Does he want to be, that, Hall of Famer for sure, but, that Hall of Famer, but he never won a ring. Is that going to sort of chafe at him after he retires? And who knows whether he'll be an analyst or a coach or just hang out on the banana boat.
Just being a banana boat guy. Do you think there's a
That's the question.
Do you think there's a really good fit for him somewhere around the league? Like, do you see a place where Chris Paul fits in? Not in terms of salary, not in terms of money, but do you see a place where he fits in immediately and maybe catapults a team into that discussion of being a title team?
Well, the Spurs is the most obvious choice, I think, for me. I mean, he would be a good fit there. He's got that high basketball IQ that would work really well with Pop's offense. So the Spurs, I could see maybe that's the place where he goes. And obviously Tony Parker, he's lost more than one step.
I think he lost a leg, didn't he? Didn't they have to amputate his whole quad or something?
Who knows? But obviously a player well past his prime. So if he's chasing a ring, I think San Antonio is probably what he looks to do. Again, not really what you think of as a San Antonio move. looking for all these all-stars to sign. But it makes sense for him, I think.
Okay.
And I think that they do stand a good chance against Golden State with Chris Paul added to the lineup.
All right, that's fair. I think they would. I'm looking at their stuff right now. They'd have to move a little bit of salary to fit him in under the max. I mean, I know I obviously said to you don't consider salary. But I'm looking at it and I think it's a possibility. They have a little wiggle room, and they have a lot of, as the Spurs often do, they have a lot of guys under contract for like $3 million.
Right.
But they would probably have to move Gasol, Parker, and Danny Green, which doesn't take away a ton, I don't think. I mean, Danny Green.
Yeah, I can live with that if I'm the Spurs.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Most definitely. Like moving Tony Parker, moving on from Green, who's a fine player who hits threes and plays defense, but to have a core of Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, Patty Mills is probably gone, Dwayne Dedmon, Kyle Anderson, who's really come on, DeJounte Murray. They do lose Simmons. But, I mean, yeah, I think you're totally right. I think, like, if you can make that happen, you fit Chris Paul under that. How about this? Let me hit you with a second team and tell me what you think about it. The Milwaukee Bucks. That's the team I've been thinking about where he fits in, because you got Giannis, who has just blown up and is absolutely an all-star. You've got Jabari Parker coming off injury, Chris Middleton. I think that there is a lot of talent there, and I'm not sure what their financial situation is, but I think that he could fit in there. What do you think about Milwaukee?
Well, I mean, I think it would be a good fit for him, but I don't see him taking that. The team absolutely does get better with Chris Paul coming on it, as does every team in the league.
Yep.
But does that make them immediate championship contenders? I'm not sure. With a weaker East, it probably does get him to the conference finals, so he can add that notch to his belt. But how much of a difference does that make? I feel like it's going for the finals, the real finals, or nothing, and winning the real finals at that.
You think that's the notch that he doesn't care about the conference finals? There's no getting there. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's still just a consolation prize at best.
Okay.
While it would be the next progression in his career, I don't think that would make him happy enough where he'd be comfortable leaving behind the money, leaving behind the Allstate commercials. I mean, not that he necessarily would have to, but it's certainly easier to do that sort of thing in LA. I don't see him leaving for the Bucks.
Yeah, he's 32 now. He just turned 32 this month. You got to think like he's at the tail end or maybe even the end of his prime, probably. I mean, I think so. Like, I don't know how many tremendously effective years there are left in a 6-foot point guard.
Yeah, whoever signs him has to be in a win now mentality.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I'm not sure that the Bucks are there yet. I don't think they're in a win now mentality because they didn't even make the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken.
No, they did. They did. They lost to Toronto in 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, I think you're probably right. I think that putting Chris Paul on it doesn't make you a championship caliber team, just because of how good LeBron is, as we've covered, but also how good Golden State is. Like, there are two huge mountains you have to overcome, and Chris Paul sort of fits in with quite a few guys in that era who may just not get there. They're just too high a mountain to scale. Barkley was that way. There were a bunch of guys in the Jordan era, Reggie Miller, who just never got there because Michael Jordan stood in their way. And I think we're kind of in like a polar version of that, where there are two teams. Like, if you can't beat Cleveland and you can't beat Golden State, then you're probably not winning a title.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So whoever goes with him has to be a win now. Because another thing is, towards the end of that, if you sign him to a 4-year, 5-year, you probably got to offer him a 5-year contract to lure him away. The last couple of years of that contract, you may be regretting it.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, he is 32 now. So when he's 36 or 37, you may be wondering, why are we paying this guy, I don't know what it would be, 30, 40 million, somewhere in there. I don't know what anything's worth anymore.
Nobody does. I think he's if he signs with the Clips, he's eligible for the 5-year, $200 max. If he signs with anybody else, I think it's 4 years, $154, but I'm not 100% on that number. So it's leaving $50 million on the table. That's essentially what the. Do you think that he's made enough money in his career that even though he worked this into the CBA so he could sign it, do you think that there's a little bit of a question there, or do you think? I mean, I think he's probably locked in. What do you think?
I think there is a little bit of a question there. I'd like to see him come back to the Clippers, of course, but I think there is a little bit of a question there, just because he is so competitive, and I don't think he wants to be known as the Reggie Miller of this generation. He's had a very competitive streak to him, and I think it's really chafed him that, for one, he's never made it to the conference finals, but even that he's never won a championship, even though he's 2 series away from doing that at his best.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of a question there. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out.
All right, let's flip it over to the Clippers side. Do you? I mean, I think you probably do. Do you just immediately offer Blake and Chris the max if you're Steve Ballmer and the Clippers?
It depends on what they want. Do they want to be a profitable team, or do they want to go for a championship? Again, as much as I enjoy watching this team, and I do very much enjoy watching this team, re-signing them, I'm not really sure what the cap is, but I don't think it's winning a championship. So perhaps you blow it up and start over, but who's to say you won't be the Clippers as they existed pre-Chris Paul, and just sort of that bottom of the barrel kind of team if you do blow up.
And I know a lot of people have said blow it up. I just don't know that there's a tremendous amount of possibility to do that. I mean, I don't think anybody's taking Blake Griffin off your hands for a high first rounder anymore. I don't think that anybody's taking Chris Paul off your hands for a high first rounder. Probably DeAndre. I think there definitely is a market for DeAndre, but those other two guys, like Blake Griffin, who was one of the 3 best players in the league 4 years ago, I just think people are a little leery of taking him on with the injuries and the decline in his athleticism.
I mean, the injuries certainly do add up, and they do present a question for anyone who would be interested in him at this point. He does seem to come back from injuries very well, but there have been a lot of them. So I can understand people being wary of him at this point. But if he exercises his player option, maybe they don't have to trade a first rounder for him. Maybe they can get him with cap space, depending on the team. I'm just not really sure what will happen there. I really have no answer. I think Blake likes the LA lifestyle probably more than Chris Paul even does. So I think he'll probably be returning to the Clippers. I mean, we will see, but I think it'll happen.
I don't see any easy fix, but I've heard one thing I've heard kicked around, and I don't know the numbers on it. I don't know that it works, but I've heard that a lot of people have talked about swapping Blake Griffin for Carmelo Anthony. Do you have any thought on that? So do you think that pushes them over the edge, or much the same?
I mean, I don't like that trade if I'm Doc Rivers. I would certainly not trade Blake for Melo. I've heard similar rumors through the grapevine as well, but I don't know. I mean, that's not really my stock and trade is the rumor mill.
All right, let me hit you with one more deal. Blake Griffin for Carmelo Anthony and a banana boat.
Well, I mean, you can have a lot of fun on a banana boat.
Does that push you over? But see, you only have 2 of the banana boat boys. Oh, you know what, though? Dwayne Wade's a free agent, I think, this year. So you could add 3 of the demand. So you could have Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, and a banana boat.
I mean, that's classic banana boat right there.
I think that's you're starting on a pretty solid banana boat. Plus, if it's 2010, I think you're a title team. So think about that.
Well, yeah, find us a time machine and we're good. Otherwise, you have a great vacation, but not much more than that.
That was what I had said. That was my thing about the last 3 years of Garnett, Pierce, and Allen. I was like, man, this would be such a good team in 2008. Like,
yeah.
That was the time machine years.
Well, and they were a great team in 2008.
Exactly. So when 2008 gets here, you guys are in trouble. I don't know. I don't. I think the Clippers are in a very weird position where they probably aren't competitive, and they probably don't have a ton of options in terms of blowing it up and starting over. So I think they probably just run it back, maybe try to make a patchwork deal, and sort of ride this out and sell tickets. I mean, that's my take on it. Is just like at some point the Lakers landed the number 2 pick. They're on the rise. You know, you'll probably lose the city, but I think you got to stay competitive and stay in the limelight, because if you slide back into what you were, and Steve Ballmer doesn't want to do this, but if you slide back into what you were, that's very bad for the optics of your team being in the same city as the Lakers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you don't want to be the Clippers of old. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. But you know, someone's got to stop Doc from just trading away all of their picks. I mean, they're an old team. They need to be a young team. You know what I mean? They need some youth on that team, and they don't have a whole lot of it.
Doc did this same thing in Boston, where he would constantly mortgage the middle distant future for the now, and it wasn't even like 3 or 4 or 5 years out. It would be like next year. We would mortgage next year for this year. And I just feel like that's such a bad way to play. I mean, I'm looking at their Clippers roster right now. I don't see, besides Blake Griffin, I don't see a single talent that was developed by the Clippers.
Yeah. I mean,
think so. I don't think any of them are. And I think
my point. I think you're right.
My point in saying that is that when you see a team like San Antonio develop,
DeAndre.
Oh, DeAndre. Okay, yeah. Good point. But when you see guys like DeJounte Murray or Jonathan Simmons or Kawhi Leonard, for that matter, or Ginobili or Parker, like back through the years, there have been all these guys that the Spurs drafted and the Spurs developed. And I think that's part of a sort of a low-key part of what's made them competitive is they get guys on a deal so that they can spend money elsewhere, and they develop them. And I think that's something that Doc has just never done. Both as a coach and as the president of basketball operations. He doesn't develop guys. And I think that's tough on your organization to have.
Well, and not only does he not develop guys, but it seems to me he's always trading for veterans and not even players in their prime, you know? I mean, taking Paul Pierce, I mean, I know you're a big Paul Pierce fan, but clearly his best years were far behind him by the time he put on the Clippers jersey.
Listen, Paul Pierce is the reason the Celtics got the number 1 pick, so don't you ever speak ill of him. Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett were worth 1 Markelle Fultz, so no speaking ill. But yeah, you're totally right. I mean, adding and sometimes it just goes to you don't have a lot of cap space. You got to add guys at a deep discount, but there's just no development. Like Bryce Johnson maybe played 1 minute a game this year, maybe. Like none of their rookies, and I can't remember. Like I'm trying to think, like who's the last Clippers draft pick that I remember making an impact? It's probably Blake Griffin, right?
I think absolutely, yeah. None of them really come to mind since Blake Griffin to me, so. Yeah, I think you're right there.
Yeah, that's rough. I'm looking back at the players they've drafted in the past couple of years. They didn't have a pick in 2015. They draft Bryce Johnson, C.J. Wilcox, Reggie Bullock. They like drafting players from Carolina. Trey Tompkins, Al-Farouq Aminu. That was part of the trade to get Chris Paul. Yeah, Blake Griffin is the last one before, and then DeAndre the year before that. So in 10 years, pretty much, or in 8 or 9 years, they haven't developed a single player in-house. And I think that's probably a lot of the problem of where they are today.
I think you're right. And I think a lot of that falls at the feet of Doc in particular. It's just, he just seems to have no long-term vision. I mean, he seems to be an okay to good coach. I mean, he does have a ring. But as far as a GM, he just has no long-term vision. He just, what can I do this year? And that's just not a winning strategy. Yeah. Not to take you to finals again.
Yep. So I think that well, I'll ask you this, but I think I probably already know the answer. Is one of the big keys to the Clippers restarting the franchise or blowing it up or whenever it does happen, whether it's this year or whether it's a couple of years, is the number one key changing management?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
That you gotta be rid of Doc.
You do. I mean, you do. If you can't get rid of him as a GM and keep him as a coach, then you get rid of him in both places.
Yeah.
He's not irreplaceable by any means. So yeah, I think you got to get rid of Doc.
All right. Well, I think that about covers Clippers. You want to give us a hot take on the rest of the conference finals? Is either team going to win a game? Are the Spurs or the Celtics going to win a game?
That depends on if Kawhi Leonard comes back.
Okay, if Kawhi Leonard comes back, how many games do they win?
2 games.
2 games. What about Boston? Does Boston win a game?
No.
No. Okay. And let's go on out. Let's go one step further. Cleveland, Golden State. Who you got?
My heart's saying Cleveland, so I'm just gonna go with Cleveland.
You're going with Cleveland.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna go Cleveland in 7. Cleveland in 7.
Cleveland in 7. Okay, we bring you on for the hot takes. That's what we bring you on for. You told us LeBron James was good at basketball, and now you're saying Cleveland in 7. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good take. I'm not sure how I feel. I think Golden State's probably just too talented. The more I read about them, the more I write about them, the more I realize they're ridiculously good. But I don't think you can ever and let me qualify this whole podcast where it sounds like I'm the biggest LeBron lover. Matt knows this better than anybody. I'm not a LeBron lover. I'm a LeBron.
He is not.
I'm a LeBron respecter though, and I don't think you can ever really truly count out a LeBron team at this stage in his career. 5 years ago, sure. 10 years ago, absolutely. But right now, I just don't think you can ever count out LeBron because maybe sometimes he'll just have 42 points and 15 rebounds and 15 assists. So I respect your Cleveland in 7. I'll probably say Golden State in 6. I don't know. Now it feels bad. Now that it's out of my mouth, it feels bad. It's out there now. Whatever. Mate, always appreciate you coming on the show. This is your first visit. I'm sure of many more. We'll be back with you guaranteed at some point during the summer, right around July. We will most definitely have you back on the show when we find out about this Chris Paul saga.
Sounds good.
And
can't wait to discuss it and or cry.
You would be the first. Actually, I'm going to make sure nobody cries on the show from now till then, so you can have the inaugural cry on the show.
I appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a part of everything, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
It was my pleasure, Alex.
All right. And thanks, everybody, for listening. I always appreciate you listening. I always appreciate you doing whatever it is, however you interact with me. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, and1 Analytics, and check out the website, and1analytics.blogspot.com. I posted a new article today with 5 burning questions about the Eastern Conference Finals, so that's worth checking out. The Facebook page will be up soon. The podcast is available on Soundcloud. It's available on YouTube if you want to watch it that way. It also will hopefully, fingers crossed, be available on iTunes sometime shortly. So there's a lot of ways to interact with me. If you want to email me, it's and1analyticsblog@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, as always, and until then, I'm Alex West for the And1 Analytics Podcast. I'll see you next time.